Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to another custom position. So this video is on another custom position I have, and it's another trapped position. And this position is called trapped queens and kings combined. Um, Trapped queens and kings combined, and is basically, as you can see here, the queens and the kings are all trapped. Each side has a trapped queen. They have two rooks and a knight, as well as 11 pawns each. And so what's going to happen is this first video is going to show the some of the main strategies of the position, but it's not going to go too deep into theory or really show much theory at all. I'm just going to show a bunch of example games because there are a lot of different strategies. And then from the following videos, I'm going to go over the established theory in the position. So let's start. So first thing you want to note is that there's trapped queens here and trapped kings here. So what we want to do is we want to free the queens, like you've seen with other custom positions I have done, and also you want to checkmate the enemy kings. So to free the queens, we can free them with a rook. So for example, white can just play rook takes a2 first move, or white can play something like knight c3 and knight takes a2 to free the queen. So those are kind of like some of the things that that white can do in order to free the queen. But you'll notice that also there's two kings trapped. So white could, like, for example, try to go to e3 and then to f5 to mate the black king. And so knights are going to be very important in this position as well as queens. And one of the really important things in this position is tempo. So for example, if we look at our freeing the queen plan, where the knight goes to c3 and then takes on a2, um, it's going to take a few moves for white to get the pieces out, whereas an active move, like for example rook to f1 over here, which eyes this whole f file over here, that could be a very helpful move as well. So really, material, king safety, and activity are all really important. Also, if you'll note, there are no pawns on h2 and h7. So if you were to get a major piece, like if white can get a rook, for example, to h8, that would be checkmate. So yeah, that's basically a basic overview of the position. But yeah, also the knights can trap the queen. So for example, if you look at this knight for white, it could go to c7 and trap the queen, or it could go from e4 to c5 and trap the opponent's queen. So that's also a plan in this position, and it can work, but also it does take some time. So for plans where the knight like traps and captures the queen, as you can see by the arrows I've drawn, it takes several moves. So when one side's trying to do that, like another side can let their queen get trapped, but then they can use their like development and activity in order to still win the game. It's quite a dynamic position with many plans. So I'm in this introductory video, I'm not going to go over the theory, but to start the game, lots of transpositions, but knight c3 is normally the preferred theory. You could play rook f1, lots of times transpose. e4 is all right, but you generally want to play knight c3 or rook f1. Knight e3 is all right as well, um, but after e6, it stops the immediate threat of knight f5, and so white is a little bit limited in what they can do, as well as black can probably play knight c6 and free the queens over here. So the main move is knight to c3. There's a lot of theory with that. Knight e3 works. You can play rook f1 and transpose as well. And yeah, but depending on the game, different strategies can be put into place. So I'm just going to go over a few example games in this video. Okay, so this game, great. Okay, so in this game, I was playing as black. So my opponent played knight c3. I played knight c6, and knight e4 was played. So actually, so knight e4 here is looking to do two things. First thing, you can take on g5 at some point, maybe. So if the knight takes on g5 and like the king recaptures, if you had a rook, let's say on f1, you could bring the rook down. And one other theme that I forgot to mention in this position is that these pawns, so I'm just going to highlight them in blue, um, they can become very important. So if some pawns are captured, like let's say, for example, let's say that white's h5 and g4 pawns are gone, then black could play king h5 and g4 is actually checkmate. So sacrificing and capturing these pawns are very important because there could be checkmate on the board. And one other thing is that in the starting position, the kings cannot move. So stalemate is it can be an opportunity uh, that's in this position. So that's yet another theme. So so we have freeing the queens with the knights or the rooks. We have trapping the queens with the knights. We have peace activity. We have like attacking the kings with the knights, and we have pawn checkmates and stalemates. So those are some of the main themes. So going back to this first example game, knight e4 was played. I think my opponent wanted to get to c5 and trap my queen. Actually, over here I played d6, but that is not needed. D6 is not needed here because white will spend some time getting the knight, like spend some time capturing the queen. So, for example, let me load up the analysis board on this. Um, so, um, if we go knight e4, let's say black plays rook hf8 or I guess e6 here. The computer does say it works over here. It's interesting. But if rook takes a7, okay, rook af1 is saying, but if knight c5, knight d4, and what if white decides to capture the queen? Rook takes a6, and then let's say yeah, white tries to sacrifice the rook because white wants to get their queen out now that they've um, taken away black's queen. White just wants to be up material, but also see black has a counter trap, but also knight takes e2 is looking at f4. Now that there's no pawn on e2, white can't play e3 to defend against that. So rook f1 is the only move, and okay, yeah, knight d4 so is a move over here. Maybe probably now trying to go and trap the queen. So in this position, white tried to take black's queen before black could free it, but black had their own ideas to trap white's queen as well, and also try and checkmate against the king. Okay, so going back to the position, we had d6 on the board. Um, Knight c3 was played. So I think my opponent played knight e4 and back to c3 because if you look at their next move, they wanted to attack my pawns. So if I already moved my pawns, they'll be it could be a bit weaker. Like for example, if I were to play e6 over here, my opponent has knight c7, and now because I played d6, this pawn on e6 is hanging. So my opponent wanted to induce weaknesses. What's actually interesting over here is after d6, there's a opening trap, which is actually rook takes a2 over here. And the idea is that this move is perfectly playable and fine, but the trap is that if I were to take the rook, it's actually mate in two because queen e3. And remember what I mentioned earlier with the knight being able to capture on g5. Well, now the knight is threatening g5 as well as the queen, and there's nothing I can do to stop checkmate. So if I just play something, it's going to be mate over here. So that's an interesting trap in the position. So d6, knight c3 was played. And I took knight takes a7 in this game, trying to free my queen. My opponent went to trap my queen. Over here, I'm wondering why I didn't play knight c6. That seems the computer. Oh, because I think didn't want my queen to be trapped. But wow, see the computer always finds well knight d4 before like we saw before to trap the queen on a3 and also to take this e2 pawn threatening knight f4 mate. those are plans as well, but the computer even finds this extremely tactical position. The computer even finds knight takes a5. The idea, I assume, is that after knight takes a6, yeah, knight c4, um, knight c4 to white frees the knight, um, and black should, so white actually wins the knight, but I think, yeah, the threat of b2 and like these two pawns for motion, it kind of frees, it kind of like makes the rook not able to move very much, which is why black might be better even though they're down a piece over here. But yeah, definitely a very tough position. I would probably favor white here, but the computer thinks otherwise. So it's extremely tactical. So here I played rook ac8. I gave up that pawn, so now my opponent's threatening f5 mate. So I played rook hf8. My opponent captured. I captured. Knight takes. So now they're up a full rook. So I think, yeah, they just sacrificed their rook um, because now they're going to be up by one pawn. But here's one very key theme with this position, as I said before, is piece activity. So it's my move over here, so I can put some pressure on white's position, um, like that. Um, so my opponent can also put pressure, and here I chose not to take the queen because even though my king is no longer trapped, like it can move now to h7 once I play rook f8. After rook f1, like my rook is kind of stuck over here. Um, my rook is kind of stuck over here, so I want to play, like, after here, if I were to play g6, for example, I can't because rook f6 comes, because I'd like to play g6, and my idea is, like, if my opponent took back, then I'm going to win this pawn, and then I should win this game, but I can't play that, so there's nothing I can really do over here. So I took on e2, my opponent took on b7, played rook f8, and now they blundered because I have rook f1. So this shows the theme before of getting a piece to the back rank. So my opponent resigned here because if they take, for example, they try to mate me, but this is checkmate. So that shows another theme of the position. As you can see that this position is extremely tactical. So this game was played before I had understanding of theory in the position. And I think it's very understanding principles are really important because you're not going to be able to calculate every tactical nuance in this custom position. So for example, as you gain more experience in it, you'll know like when it's okay for your queen to get trapped and when it's not, and also because of the nature of this position, I would say that knights, like queens, are not that much more valuable than knights and rooks, and knights and rooks are very similar in value, I would say, in this position. So it's one of the custom positions that's very different from standard chess. Um, and yeah, so this position, my opponent made a blunder here uh, and blundered the back rank. All right, so that was that game. I want to go over this game now. Um, Great. Okay, so this is another example of a game that can be played in this position. So knight c3, knight c6. So rook hf1, rook hf8, knight d5. So here my opponent is going for knight c7 ideas. See, I took knight takes a7. So the idea here is that, let me go to the analysis board. So my idea with knight takes a7 is that if knight c7, I want to be able to take back with the rook. So now my opponent's pawns are less threatening. So my opponent took, and I played queen e6 with the idea of I wanted to protect my e7 pawn. So there's no knight takes e7 and knight f5 threatened. So now this game is a very interesting example that sort of illustrates that, like, activity activity could be more important like than material, as well as that queens aren't as powerful compared to other pieces. So in this custom position, well, in this position, I sacrifice to free my queens. I sacrifice the knight in order to get my queen out. And actually, my opponent's not really even up in development. But as you can see, the engine evaluates as a draw because my opponent's knight is extremely strong. Um, so my opponent's just developing their pieces, I develop mine, and this a7 pawn is going to be very annoying because if I ever have my rook move from it, from here, let's say my opponent like takes on f4 and then I take back with the rook. Let's say this happens, then my opponent can get a promotion, right? Uh, so that's the other thing with sacrificing your pieces is that you kind of mobilize your opponent's pawns a bit more. Um, so therefore, I guess my opponent would be up in activity here because their pieces are not restrained. And so um, and so it shows that black, like computer thinks black is slightly better here. I think the position is very playable for both sides. So over here, my opponent blundered though because this is going to show one of the themes of the position. And my opponent resigned here because if they take the queen, king takes h5, and whatever my opponent does, it's going to be checkmate, g4 mate. So yeah, that's a quick example of a game in this position. And as you can see over here, the position was even one, even though I got my queen out and my opponent's queen was still trapped. Um, my opponent was able to have their pieces become more active. And by the way, rook takes f4, I can take with the pawn. So I'm still guarding against promotion threats. And actually over here, you might think that there's a king takes h4 and g5 checkmate idea, but the queen f6, queen f6 kind of stops that for now. So it doesn't work, and then I can take. So that was that game. So yeah, this introductory video is just to show you some games that will give you a sense of this position. By the way, these games are played in a custom position, like a tournament, this position. And I'm not showing, like, I'm going to show more games when I show the theory as well, because as you can see with this position, there's some of, like, a lot of the moves are not intuitive. So, So if I show the theory, you might have lots of questions as to why a move that's not in the theory wasn't played. So showing a lot of example games is also going to be the theme for my teaching you about trap queens and kings combined. So on to this one, knight c3, knight c6. So this is the most common opening in this position. Rook hf1, knight takes a7 was played, and oh yeah, so this game is basically just an illustration of if you try to free your queen. So here my opponent could have taken with the rook, but if you're not careful, then then white can capture and not have to sacrifice any pieces to free their queen, which is kind of like a theme of the trapped queens variant that I have videos on, opening videos on. And yeah, so this position I won, I was just up a piece, so you have to be careful here. And yeah, that's all I want to show for that game. And now two more games to show for this video. Let me analyze this. Okay, so in this game as well, knight c3, knight c6. I was playing black over here. And yeah, rook hf1 is also extremely popular move in this position. And over here, so this is showing tempo and piece development, because in this game I played knight d4 because I wanted to go to c2 and trap my opponent's queen. So my opponent took, and I went over here to trap their queen. And then, so over here I didn't want my opponent to go knight d5 and knight c7 trapping my queen, so I thought I'll free my queen as fast as I can. But my opponent played knight e4. So this is very interesting. So while I'm spending moves bringing my knight, bringing my knight to d4 and c3, and then trying to eventually take the queen, and then I'm taking with my rook. These are not like active moves towards like gaining control over the center and attacking the king. So as you can see over here, white is winning according to the computer because I've spent too many moves on not developing my pieces. So we would say that my knight here is not developed just because, well, it could or could not be developed, but because I've gone over here, my idea is that I'm trying to take the queen, so that's not like a developing thing. I'm trying to move my knight many times in order to take the queen, and thing over here is not developed as well, so the idea is that my opponent's going to take on g5. So over here, I realize that that's what they're going to do, so if I take the queen, knight takes g5, it's threatening mate on f7, and yeah, there's nothing I can do to stop mate. If I take the knight, um, if I take the knight, we have this same idea, and there's nothing I can do to stop g5 mate. So in this position, I realized I can't do that, so I played knight to d4 because I'm trying to stop this, trying to protect this f5 square. So if the knight takes, then I can take back, and there's no rook f5. My opponent's trying to kick my knight out of there. I went to e6. Now I'm trying to defend against g5 over here. My opponent took, I took, they played rook f5, so now they're threatening two things. So they're threatening to take on g5 at some point, and then their king will come in and their pawns will come in, and they're also threatening to take on b5 and free their queen without sacrificing a piece, as we saw in the last game. So I defend my pawn. They played rook af1, so if we just look at this position, my queen is my queen is bad, my rook is bad, my knight is okay, but it's just defending, and all my opponent's pieces except for their queen, they're all good pieces, and they have lots of pressure on g5. So played b6, rook takes g5, and I resign, because if I take, my opponent has knight takes g5, and they're gonna have f7 mate because they brought their second rook into the game. And if I don't take, I'm just lost because my opponent can, let's say, take rook takes b5. Oh, actually that hang e4. Let's say rook e5, and they're threatening to come into the position. So if I play rook b8, for example, or even rook takes e6, because my opponent is still going to get g5 mate. So the position is just lost over here. So it's very difficult. You can't just try to go and take your opponent's queen and free your own queen, because activity and king safety is also really important as well. This is trapped queens and kings combined, so there are so many themes. Okay, just one last game, and then one last game for this video. Let me analyze this one. So okay, so this game was a very messy game. Very game, and but very interesting, very tactical. In some of the theory videos that don't cover just this move order, I will show you other variations of games, but this is the most popular one. So knight e4 was played. I played d6, rook takes a2. So actually over here I fell into the trap. This is before I knew what the trap was. So I played b takes a2 over here, but luckily my opponent didn't realize the idea. And so they took back on a2, and as you can see, the computer still evaluates white as winning. So over here, you might ask, how come sacrificing to free the queen and sacrificing to free the queen for white is so good? Because black has no counters to that. They don't have any developed pieces or anything. Actually, this queen is looking to come to f7 or even e6. This queen is very active. So white's extremely active. This knight on e4 is an amazing piece, and it's going to sacrifice on g5. So see, as the computer thinks more, it evaluates white better and better. So white is winning. I played knight takes b4, queen f7, and the position's already completely winning, but my opponent let me get some chances over here. Took, they have a mate in 10, rook f6, so they're threatening to take on g5, so I blocked that. They just took with the knight, and now if I were to take back, queen takes f6 is threatening my rook, and also it's threatening to play g7, so this is completely winning. So I played knight c6 and it's still winning. Queen took on d6, and now I'm playing queen takes a5 to get my queen out, but my opponent has so much more development than me. And so they allowed me to take over here, but their queen is coming in and they're going to play g7. So it's pretty much game over here, but I found one I found one idea, which is to play f5. If my opponent, let's say, takes with the f pawn, then note I can't play king h5 to try to play g4 checkmate because g7 is check and I'm going to get mated. So we can't do that. But my idea was that knight e5 is threatening the queen, and if the queen were to go to any move, like it'll have to move away. So now when I take on h5, oh, that's mate. Rook e8. This gets really complicated. So g7. Oh, I can just play king takes h5 over here, and now I'm threatening g4 mate. So yeah, that was the idea I saw when I played this, but I was expecting if queen takes f5, I was expecting. Oh, I think over here I was just trying to move the queen away from f7 because it was threatening to play g7. So now g7 is not threatened right now, and I can play maybe b4 to try and get my queen into the game. But the and I was thinking after my opponent goes back to f7, then I might have some, like I might have queen e5. But everything is losing over here. Also g7 here apparently works too. But my opponent took with the pawn. And oh, I didn't play knight e5. I played queen takes d2. Well, that's actually a good move. So the idea with queen takes d2 is that I want to is after my opponent plays g7. So my opponent played it. I'm going to check on g4. My opponent has to take, and now it's actually a draw after queen e5 check because I can perpetual check my opponent. However, over here, over here, my opponent made a mistake. They should have just played king h2, and I was gonna draw this. I was just gonna draw by repetition this game. But my opponent took the pawn, and now I can win the queen apparently. But the problem is that winning the queen actually loses. So these are the tactics of the position. So my opponent takes on g4. And over here, apparently, see what this line does the computer want? Queen h4, queen d4, knight takes f7 now. So it is knight takes f7, but I messed up the move order over here. I took, and the idea is that my opponent promoted to a queen with check, and they can promote again because they have a pawn on a7. So now I'm completely lost and there's no perpetual check anymore because my opponent can block with the pawn. And I tried to threaten queen h2 mate, but my opponent was faster because their queen now protects against that. So I tried to make some more threats, but after here, my opponent like has stopped any play because they're going to take the queen. So I have to take, and now they're going to promote. So yeah, that was a very tactical game. I could have gone into more depth on all the moves, but this is an introduction video. And actually, all the games that I showed, they don't include the main line theory. These games are from before I had analyzed it in depth. But when I show you the theory, I will show games that I've analyzed in depth. So the way this is going to go, my videos on this position is I'm going to in videos, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show like some side variations first because the main variations are much more deep. So I'll show a few side variations that are very much playable, and then we'll go into the deepest variations. And um, just know that there's like many moves that you're going to think that could be played in the position that I'm not going to show because there's just so many moves that can be played and so many moves that are suboptimal according to really long complicated engine lines. And so like a lot of the theory that I have from this position was me putting the position and looking at the computer evaluation and to find the lines because there's so many so many tactics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the theory and I'm going to explain the reason behind the moves. Just know that there are like so many moves that can be played. However, in this position, when I played a tournament where I created a tournament of this custom position, um, by the time we got to the final round, a lot of the theory that I analyzed and other players have analyzed theory in this position as well. So so the theory is still going to be useful in this position. When you see moves that are off, you'll be able to take advantage. But yeah, there's a lot of moves and there are a lot of deep theory lines, but not like as many as other custom position. But the lines are very, very deep. So I plan to have one video on some side variations, and then I'm going to dive into the main variations with knight c3. There's a lot of them, and there is a way to play knight e3 as well. Moves like rook f1 kind of transpose into knight c3 lines. So I'm mostly just going to cover knight c3 with one video or so on knight e3, and yeah, and one video on just general opening, just general some side opening lines and ideas in the position. It's going to be a lot of deep engine lines, and it's going to be quite interesting. So yeah, that's my plan on this position. But hope you enjoyed this introductory video to trap queens and kings combined. Thank you for watching.